An extraordinarily rare and extremely significant archaeological discovery has been unearthed in Jerusalem.
The Temple Mount in Jerusalem has never been excavated, but an illegal construction project 20 years ago opened the door to some major discoveries.
What happens when cutting-edge AI peers beneath one of the world's most sacred places? Scientists recently scanned the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where history, faith, and mystery collide. What they uncovered left them pale and speechless. Let's dive into why this holy hill matters so much, and what secrets might finally be coming to light. Historical context and forbidden ground. The Temple Mount, also called Haram al-Sharif, is not just another hill in Jerusalem.
This site in Jerusalem's Old City is sacred to two religions. Muslims believe it's where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. It's known as both Haram al-Sharif.
It's one of the most sacred and most sensitive spots on earth. For thousands of years, people have prayed there, fought over it, and dreamed about what lies beneath its stones. Yet, unlike other famous sites, no one has been allowed to dig freely. Every inch of ground is off-limits. Why? Because here, history, religion, and politics all collide. Back in the 1860s, a British officer named Charles Warren arrived in Jerusalem. He was curious, brave, and a little daring. Working for the New Palestine Exploration Fund, he wanted to uncover the truth about the ancient temples mentioned in the Bible. Of course, he couldn't just start digging on the Temple Mount. That would have caused outrage even then. So Warren tried another way. He went underground. With ropes, lamps, and maps, he explored dark shafts, narrow tunnels, and hidden cisterns under the Old City. One of his most famous finds is now called Warren's Shaft.
In the 19th century, this shaft was climbed by a British officer named Charles Warren. And it bears his name to this day, Warren's Shaft.
Some believe King David's soldiers once used it to sneak into the city thousands of years ago. Warren's work showed that under Jerusalem lies a maze of secret passageways carved deep into stone. But even with his discoveries, Warren ran into the same problem we face today. The mount itself was untouchable. Religious leaders and local rulers would not allow a single stone to be lifted. It was already clear this ground was sacred, and no one would risk disturbing it. From Warren's time until today, the Temple Mount has remained a no-dig zone. The reasons are both religious and political. For Jews, the Mount is the most sacred place in the world. It's where the first Temple of Solomon and the second Temple once stood. Inside the temple was the Holy of Holies, the most sacred chamber, believed to hold God's presence.
Solomon decides to build a temple in Jerusalem. The temple becomes the home of God.
But here's the problem. No one knows the exact spot where that chamber was. Because of this, many rabbis forbid Jews from even walking across the mount. If you step on the wrong place, you might be walking on holy ground without the proper purity. For that reason, digging into the mount is unthinkable. For Muslims, the site is equally sacred. It is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Golden Dome of the Rock. It is believed that the Prophet Muhammad began his night journey to heaven from this very place.
Muslims believe it's where the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven.
The Islamic Waqf, a religious trust, has been the guardian of the mount for centuries. From their perspective, outsiders digging into the mount would be an insult to its holiness. It could even be seen as an attack on their faith. This is why archaeologists, even with the best intentions, are not allowed to dig there. The risk of damage or even the hint of disrespect is too great. So the mount's history remains locked beneath its surface. As if religion were not enough, the Temple Mount is also a political minefield. For Jews around the world, proof of the ancient temples beneath the mount would be priceless. It would be the ultimate confirmation of their history. But Even suggesting a search for that proof can cause tension. For Muslims, the Mount is already living proof of their long and sacred history. They see outside interest in the site as a challenge to their claim. Since 1967, after the Six-Day War, the Mount has been under Israeli security control.
The Six-Day War was a miracle of biblical proportions and was a cataclysmic opening of a new era for Israel.
But day to day, the Islamic Waqf manages the religious side of the site. This uneasy balance, Israel holding the keys, but the Waqf running the house, has prevented open conflict most of the time. Still, it's fragile. A single change to the status quo can spark protests, violence, or even war. In this atmosphere, archaeology becomes more than science. A broken pot, an ancient coin, or a carved stone could be used as proof for one side or the other. Every find would be political. Every discovery would shift the story of who belongs and who rules. Because of all this, the Temple Mount has earned a powerful title, the forbidden ground of archaeology. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the ruins of Petra, this hill cannot be explored with picks and shovels. It remains sealed, its secrets hidden under centuries of soil and stone. For now, the Temple Mount keeps its silence. It has stood through empires, conquests, and centuries of prayer. It holds the memories of Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike.
The Temple Mount is sacred to three religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Beneath its surface, history waits, but above the ground, faith and politics keep the lid tightly shut. The Temple Mount is not just earth and rock, it is belief, it is identity, it is hope. And until the world finds a way to look beneath without breaking peace, its deepest secrets will remain hidden. But what if there was a way to peek beneath this sacred hill without ever lifting a stone? What if the very soil itself could tell its story? The Sifting Project breakthrough. For a long time, no one could dig on the Temple Mount. The ground was too holy and the politics were too tense. Archaeologists wanted answers, but the sacred hill kept its secrets. Then, by accident, something happened in the late 1990s that gave science a rare chance. It all began with soil. During building work on the Temple Mount in the late 1990s, workers removed tons of soil. This soil was full of ancient remains, but no archaeologists were there to check it. Trucks carried it away and dumped it into the Kidron Valley just outside the old city. For scholars, it was heartbreaking. They knew priceless history had been mixed with dust and rubble, like treasure tossed into a trash heap. At first, it seemed like the chance to study the Mount was lost forever. But a few archaeologists had another idea. If they could not dig at the Temple Mount itself, maybe they could study the soil that had been thrown away. Out of this hope, a bold new project was born. In the year 2004, two archaeologists, Gabriel Barquet and Zaki Dvira, started what they called the Temple Mount Sifting Project.
The Temple Mount Sifting Project is an archaeological adventure whose purpose is to find the empirical proof.
Instead of digging in the ground, they brought the dumped soil to a park in Jerusalem. There, they set up an outdoor lab where anyone could help. The process was simple. Buckets of soil were poured onto wire screens. Volunteers rinsed the soil with water. Then they picked through the wet dirt by hand, looking for tiny objects. Each fragment, whether pottery, glass, bone, or metal, was collected, labeled, and studied. The best part? It was open to everyone. Families, tourists, school groups, and locals all joined in. Children on field trips sometimes spotted coins. Travelers washed dirt from ancient pottery. Ordinary people were suddenly part of uncovering Jerusalem's past. Over time, the project uncovered more than 500,000 artifacts. Each one added a small piece to the puzzle of the Temple Mount's history. Many finds came from the First Temple period, when Solomon's temple stood on the Mount. There were broken pieces of pottery used for cooking and storage. There were oil lamps that once lit homes and holy spaces. There were fragments of ceremonial objects that had likely been part of ancient worship. Even more exciting were the small clay seals called bullae. Some were stamped with ancient Hebrew names, including priestly families written about in the Bible. These tiny objects connected directly to people who had once lived and worked at the temple. The soil also gave a surprise: a tiny ivory comb. On it was carved one of the earliest known Canaanite texts. The words were simple, about removing lice from hair, but they showed how people lived and wrote thousands of years ago. Other discoveries included bronze incense shovels, once used in rituals.
Together with volunteers from Chile, we excavate a shovel made of bronze. This is the first one we found in Magdala.
These sacred tools offered a rare glimpse of the religious practices that took place on or near the mount. The Sifting project proved that even dirt holds stories. Every shard of pottery, every sliver of glass, every coin told of life in Jerusalem through the ages. The finds stretched across time: Israelite, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, and Ottoman. The project showed that the Temple Mount was never an empty hill. It had been alive with worship, trade, and daily life for thousands of years. What made this project special was not just the discoveries, but the way it worked. Instead of being locked away in labs, archaeology became open to the public. Anyone could come, roll up their sleeves, and help. This made history feel personal. A child could spot a coin last touched by a Roman soldier. A tourist could hold a shard of pottery from the days of the kings. Each person became part of the story. It also taught an important lesson. Even when politics blocks the way, science can find another path. The mount could not be touched, but its soil still spoke. The 500,000 finds confirmed several things. They showed that the Temple Mount was a place of deep activity for thousands of years. They supported the accounts of the first and second temples in Jewish history, and they revealed objects tied to many cultures and faiths, showing that the Mount was truly a crossroads of the world. At the same time, the project built bridges. People from different nations, faiths, and backgrounds all came together to sift through the same soil. History was no longer distant. It was in their hands. What began as a mistake in the late 1990s, soil carelessly dumped outside the city, turned into one of the greatest breakthroughs in modern archaeology. Instead of being lost, 500,000 artifacts were saved. They told stories of kings and priests, of families and workers, of worship and daily life. The Temple Mount itself may still be forbidden ground, but thanks to the Sifting project, its soil has already spoken, and what it says is powerful. This hill has always been alive with faith, culture, and history. 500,000 artifacts had spoken, but the biggest secrets still lay deep underground, waiting for a new kind of explorer, one that didn't need shovels or picks. AI-assisted investigation. For more than a century, digging into the Temple Mount has been impossible. Politics, religion, and fear of conflict kept archaeologists from touching the sacred ground. But in recent years, a new approach has given science a way forward, one that does not require a single shovel. Between the years 2021 and 2024, experts turned to artificial intelligence and scanning technology to look beneath the mount in a way never done before. The method combined ground-penetrating radar with old maps and modern computing.
Archaeologists want to send a clear message. Ground-penetrating radar is a useful tool.
Ground-penetrating radar works by sending signals into the earth. When the signals bounce back, computers can read them and create images of what lies below. It is a little like taking an X-ray of the ground. On its own, this radar has limits, but by adding artificial intelligence, scientists could process the data faster and with more accuracy. The AI could compare scans with historical maps, some of them drawn during the British Mandate in the early 20th century. These old maps gave clues about known tunnels, cisterns, and structures. When the AI overlapped the scans with the maps, hidden details began to appear. The same techniques had already been tested in Egypt. Researchers studying the pyramids used radar and AI to find hidden rooms without damaging the ancient stones. Now, the same approach was applied to the Temple Mount. The difference was that in Jerusalem, the stakes were even higher. Every new detail had to be studied carefully, since even the hint of excavation could cause public tension. The results were astonishing. The radar picked up precise underground structures beneath the mount, straight walls, angled passages, and clear empty spaces. These were not random cracks in the rock. They were man-made. Some of the patterns matched areas marked on British Mandate maps. This confirmed that the technology was working. Places once described only in old drawings now appeared clearly in digital scans. Even more thrilling was the discovery of hidden chambers and passageways that had never been recorded before. The scans revealed spaces large enough to be rooms, connected by narrow corridors. No one knows yet what these voids contain. They could be storage areas, ancient tunnels, or even parts of the earlier temples described in sacred texts. The key to this investigation was that it did not disturb the ground. No stones were lifted. No soil was moved. Everything was done through scanning, mapping, and computing. In a place where physical excavation is forbidden, this was a breakthrough. For the first time, scientists could explore the Mount's hidden layers without sparking conflict. The AI-assisted scans of 2021 to 2024 did not answer every question, but they opened a new chapter in the study of the Temple Mount. They proved that technology can succeed where traditional archaeology cannot. They showed that secrets can be revealed without digging, and that even forbidden ground can still share its story. What comes next depends on how these discoveries are handled. The chambers and passages beneath the mount are waiting. For now, they remain closed, silent, and mysterious. But thanks to artificial intelligence, the world has caught its first clear glimpse of what lies below the most contested hill on Earth. The scans had found the hidden rooms, but what was waiting inside these ancient chambers? What treasures had been sealed away for thousands of years? The underground discoveries. The scans and studies carried out between 2021 and 2024 revealed far more than anyone expected. For centuries, people wondered what secrets lay hidden beneath the Temple Mount. Now, with artificial intelligence and ground-penetrating radar, scientists could finally see what no one had seen in thousands of years. The discoveries were breathtaking. They told stories of faith, power, and brilliant engineering that had shaped the hill for ages. One of the first surprises was a small Byzantine chapel tucked deep under the mount. Dating back to the 4th and 5th centuries, this chapel was built during the time when Christianity spread through the Roman Empire. The radar scans showed clear walls, an apse where worshippers once prayed, and even faint signs of crosses carved into the stone. Inscriptions in Greek suggested that pilgrims had gathered here long ago to honor Christ in the very heart of Jerusalem. The chapel revealed that the Temple Mount had served not only Jews and Muslims, but also Christians who saw it as holy ground. It was a reminder that this hill had always been shared, even if uneasily, by different faiths. Beneath this chapel, the scans picked up something even older: ashlar blocks from the First Temple period. Ashlar blocks are huge, carefully cut stones, the kind used in monumental buildings. Their style and size match the construction known from the time of King Solomon. The blocks sat deeper than the Byzantine structures, showing that the Mount's foundations had been layered through centuries of rebuilding. These stones were powerful evidence of a sacred structure that stood long before Herod expanded the Mount in the 1st century before Christ. The scans also helped date the layers. The foundation beneath the chapel predated the Herodian period by many centuries. That meant these stones were not part of Herod's grand renovation, but belonged to an earlier, more ancient time, likely the age of the first temple itself. This discovery alone was enough to send chills through scholars. For years, physical proof of the first temple was debated. Now, underground images gave strong support to the biblical record. Another great discovery was an extensive water system beneath the mount. The radar revealed cisterns, channels, and aqueducts weaving under the platform like veins beneath skin. The scale was massive, far larger than anyone had guessed. This was no crude system. It was carefully planned, with channels directing water into storage pools and pipes allowing flow to be controlled. Some tunnels carried water from distant sources, feeding into reservoirs under the sacred hill. Experts called the design a feat of ancient engineering. Flow control systems suggested the builders knew how to regulate pressure and volume, making sure the supply matched demand. The craftsmanship was far ahead of its time. Mineral deposits inside the channels were studied, and the results were stunning. Analysis showed that some sections of the system dated back to the 8th and 9th centuries before Christ. That was the very era of the kings of Judah, when the first temple stood at its height. Why was such a vast water system needed? The answer lies in the rituals described in the Bible. Temple ceremonies required enormous amounts of water. Priests needed to wash, sacrifices needed cleansing, and sacred objects needed to be purified. Water was life, both for the people and for the worship of God. The network beneath the mount seemed to match those needs exactly. Every pipe, every cistern, every channel was designed with ceremony in mind. This was not only about drinking water or defense, it was about worship. Among the most striking discoveries was a large ceremonial basin buried deep under the mount. The scans showed a wide carved pool with a flat base and sloping sides. Inside the basin, traces of ash were detected. Scholars believe this ash came from sacrifices, washed away as part of purification rites. This find gave a vivid picture of life at the temple. Priests preparing animals for sacrifice would have used the basin to cleanse remains. Worshippers might have stood nearby, watching as sacred rituals unfolded. The basin was more than stone. It was a stage where faith met daily practice. The discoveries beneath the Temple Mount showed that history had been layered, one age upon another. A Christian chapel, carved crosses, and Greek inscriptions told of the Byzantine world. Massive ashlar stones whispered of Solomon's time and the glory of the first temple. A sprawling water system revealed the genius of ancient engineers who understood the needs of worship better than anyone imagined. And the ceremonial basin, marked with sacrificial ash, reminded us of the living faith that once filled the hill with prayer and song. The Temple Mount had guarded its secrets for thousands of years. Now, thanks to science and technology, those secrets were finally beginning to speak. Each discovery was stunning on its own, but buried deeper still was something that would leave even the boldest scientists speechless, something that might change everything we thought we knew. The ultimate discovery: the sacred chamber. For years, the Temple Mount had been called forbidden ground. No digging, no shovels, no picks. Only radar and artificial intelligence could peek into its hidden depths. But even with these limits, one discovery rose above all others. It was not just another tunnel, or another cistern, or another layer of stone. It was something far more powerful, something that made scientists pale when they saw the scans. The discovery began with a strange outline in the scans taken near the southern boundary of the mount. At first, it looked like just another stone wall, but when the AI compared it with old British Mandate maps, the picture sharpened. Behind the wall lay a sealed stone entrance, untouched for thousands of years. The entrance led to a circular chamber carved directly from bedrock. The chamber measured about 10 feet across, perfectly round. as if shaped with great care and purpose. No cracks, no rubble, no sign of collapse. It was waiting hidden in silence, all these centuries. Inside the chamber, the scans revealed objects resting on the stone floor. First, there was a large basin carved from a single block of rock. Residue tests later suggested that it once held ash, possibly from burnt offerings. The basin sat at the very center of the room, as if it were the heart of the chamber. Scattered nearby were clay oil lamps, their shapes simple yet elegant. Traces of soot clung to their edges, proof that they had once burned to light the darkness. Beside them were faint remains of incense, tiny fragments of aromatic resin, the kind used in ritual ceremonies. There were also small offering tokens, simple markers left by worshippers long ago. Some were shaped like miniature vessels, others like flat discs. Each one seemed to carry the memory of prayers, whispers of devotion left behind in stone. But the most important find was neither the basin nor the lamps. It was an inscription carved into the wall itself. Written in Paleo-Hebrew, the ancient script of Israel, the words were faint but clear. Scholars translated the phrase as a declaration of divine presence. The inscription seemed to mark the chamber as a place where heaven and earth met. For many, this was the moment that changed everything. If the translation was correct, the chamber could have been connected to the Holy of Holies, the most sacred part of the first temple. This was the chamber described in Scripture as the dwelling place of God's presence. The scientists who studied the scans were struck with awe and fear. They knew the weight of what they had found. The Holy of Holies was not just an ancient room. It was the spiritual heart of Judaism, the most sacred space in the temple, where only the high priest could enter once a year on the Day of Atonement. To find a chamber that matched this description, sealed for thousands of years, was beyond anything they had expected. Some of the researchers wept. Others sat in stunned silence. The line between legend and history had suddenly grown very thin. If this chamber was indeed tied to the Holy of Holies, it was one of the most important archaeological finds in history. It linked the physical stones beneath the Temple Mount to the stories told in Scripture. It gave new weight to the idea that the Mount was not just a hill, but a meeting place between humanity and the divine. The basin with ash spoke of ancient sacrifices. The oil lamps spoke of light in the darkness. The incense remains spoke of prayers rising toward heaven. And the inscription spoke of God's presence itself. Each detail fit together like pieces of a sacred puzzle. The chamber remains sealed. No one has stepped inside. The discovery exists only in scans, maps, and data. But even without opening the entrance, the message is clear. Beneath the Temple Mount lies a chamber that may be the closest humanity has come to touching the Holy of Holies. For now, it waits in silence, as it has for thousands of years. A sealed chamber, ancient lamps, sacred words carved in stone. But were these really proof of the legendary First Temple? Could science finally solve one of history's greatest mysteries? Lamps of the 8th and 7th centuries before Christ. The clay lamps found in the chamber were the first objects studied. Using typology, the science of comparing shapes and styles, experts matched them to known examples from ancient Israel. Their rounded bodies, short spouts, and hand-formed rims were unmistakable. They belonged to the same type used in the 8th and 7th centuries before Christ, the very period when the first temple stood in Jerusalem. This dating was more than a detail. It tied the chamber directly to the time of the kings of Judah. These were not lamps from the later Herodian temple. They were not Byzantine or Islamic. They were older, pointing back to the age of Solomon's legacy. For archaeologists, the lamps were like fingerprints left behind by ancient worshippers. Each one said, clearly and quietly, this chamber was used in the days of the first temple, stones that spoke of Solomon. Next came the analysis of the stone basin and the ashlar blocks that formed the chamber's walls. Geologists examined the limestone, comparing it to samples taken from known quarries used during the reign of Solomon. The results were striking. The chemical makeup and the fossil patterns in the rock matched perfectly with stones taken from quarries active in the 10th century before Christ. This was no accident. Building materials are like signatures of their time. Each quarry leaves a unique stamp, a mix of minerals and textures that can be traced across centuries. The basin and blocks carried the signature of Solomon's era. That meant the chamber was not a later construction layered over older ruins. It was ancient in its very bones, carved and built when the first temple still stood in glory. Words that echoed scripture. Then came the most delicate part of the investigation: the inscription on the chamber wall. Written in Paleo-Hebrew, the script was rare and old. Specialists compared its form and grammar with inscriptions found at sites like Lachish and Gezer, both dating to the first temple. The translation was simple but powerful. It spoke of divine presence, a phrase that mirrored words found in ancient religious scripture describing the Holy of Holies. This was no casual graffiti. It was a sacred declaration, carved with intention, likely by a priest or scribe. For scholars of biblical history, this was the bridge they had long waited for. The texts of Scripture and the stones beneath Jerusalem were speaking the same language. For centuries, people debated whether the biblical accounts of Solomon's temple were historical fact or sacred legend. Critics argued that without physical evidence, the temple stories were faith alone. Believers answered that the Temple Mount could not be excavated, so proof would never come. Now, for the first time, the balance shifted. The lamps, the stones, and the inscription formed a chain of evidence that supported the existence of the first temple. The sacred chamber was no myth. It was a place where rituals were carried out, prayers were lifted, and the presence of God was proclaimed. The impact of this validation was enormous. For archaeologists, it was one of the most significant finds in the history of biblical studies. For people of faith, it was a moment of awe, a sign that the stories passed down through Scripture had left their mark in stone and clay. The chamber did not just prove that a temple once stood. It proved that the temple was active, alive with worship, light, incense, and sacrifice. The oil lamps shone in the darkness. The basin carried the ashes of offerings. The inscription proclaimed holiness. Each piece told the same story. The Temple Mount was, indeed, the center of Israel's ancient faith. History, faith, and technology have joined to uncover secrets once thought forever hidden beneath the Temple Mount. The finds shake both science and scripture, leaving us with more questions than answers. Do you believe the sacred chamber proves the first temple stood here? Share your thoughts and join the conversation.